Hi guys, thanks for joining us. My name's Lauren. We're here at EA with two extra special guests. We are joined by Garry and Danny. Hey guys, how you doing?
Very good, thank you.
Good. So let's start at the start. If you just want to give us a brief overview of what you do here at EA, in whichever order you can fight for who goes first.
Cool. So I'm the technical director of online and operations, which basically means I make the internet work.
Nice.
So,
thank you very much.
If you're playing against other people online, that's my team making that happen, basically. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah, we create all the connected services of the game, whether it be leaderboards or clan systems, challenge systems, all these sort of things.
A lot of responsibility, in other words. Yeah, as all of our roles are.
Absolutely.
And I'm a senior producer. I work with teams such as work with Garry on the online team on our last title, really just supporting them, making sure that they get what they need and we're going in the right direction, helping to set priorities on things and have conversations around that stuff. So just on that. That's
yeah, nice. Okay. Well, I guess because we're having a bit of a fireside ramble, I'm sure we're going to get a fireside post-production. Let's start, literally, let's go back to the beginning of you guys and how you kind of got here. So, Danny, what was your earliest, not necessarily earliest gaming memory, but kind of childhood games? What were you really into before gaming was a career?
Oh, that was a long, long time ago. Back in the day, there was things called Game & Watch. Actually, Nintendo used to make them. They were these little digital, before we had mobile phones, these little digital clamshell things that you could open up. And you'd have little games. One of them was a farming game, and this lady would throw a baby out the window, and you'd have to move this fireman across, and you'd bounce on this trampoline.
Games have changed.
Yeah. And then there was one. Obviously, Donkey Kong was one of the first ones on there.
Good
So
choice.
that's where I was first. Well, I didn't know at the time Nintendo and Mario. Probably the first proper game I had was at home. Something called the Atari VCS system. We had these cartridges that you'd have to put in the top, and it would go through your TV. So there's I'm from Brighton, which is a seaside town, so they had arcades down there. So this was like arcades in your home. And I remember one summer, actually, what we did back then, you don't do it anymore, clocked asteroids. So that's taken the score all the way over till it went back to 000.
Oh, that's cool.
And so that was my summer.
That's the nerd kids equivalent of going over the swing, right? That's pretty much about as exciting as it can be.
That's about every game back then kind of had one level pretty much. It just got harder and harder, and so that's what you did. Clock games.
Happy days. What about you, Garry?
I still say the word clocked, actually, even describing completing an RPG, which doesn't quite work, you know what I mean? But no, I started with, in the arcades in a similar way in London, Cricklewood, place where I grew up, and it was all beat-em-ups for me. It was all things like Double Dragon, and then sort of the seminal moment of discovering Street Fighter, where it just became like the congregation of people in my hometown playing against each other all the time. And my first computer was a Commodore 64, but it was my brother's, really, and then all Nintendo, SNES, PlayStation, went all the way through.
A lot.
Yeah, and then a lot of online gaming as I got older, as soon as that came around.
It's quite the education for both of you. So it started in good places to get you to
You
here.
still play fighting games now?
I still do, yeah. I'm not as good as I used to be, but I still on Street Fighter 5.
You were
every
really
now and
good
again.
though, right?
I used to like playing people in the office one-handed and see if they could beat me. So I'd have a beer in one hand and then try and beat them.
Don't play Garry at Street Fighter.
Not for money anyway, but yeah. But no, it's all that sort of stuff. I play everything now, though. Everything from FIFA, like say RPGs, you name it, if it's good. I mean, I'm playing Genshin Impact at the moment, which isn't exactly the same type of thing. But yeah, you name it, I'll play it.
Well, that's it. I guess we've gotten to that point with video games where we can be advertise something niche.
Yeah.
You can get that kind of massive marketing campaign for something that's like, oh, this is mine.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. And it's so nice to have that breadth of AAA and indie and all of the, the incredibly. We're so lucky right now.
I remember thinking in this industry, it's like, wow, it's not going to be any bedroom coders anymore. There was a stage, I guess about 20 years ago, when consoles came out where it had Amiga, Commodore 64, Spectrum, all of those you could program. And then the consoles came out, and I thought, well, that's going to be the end of the bedroom coders. But then it's almost like it's come out in a cycle again, where you're getting all these great indie games, and it's not about the graphics, it's about the gameplay, which is really, really exciting.
We think of something like Unity as an example of where you just need to know a bit of C# and you can get something on the screen quite quickly.
Yeah.
And it's free to download, free to use, even Unreal, other things like that. If you keep the barrier to entry low, then the creativity of people will come through, I think, which 100%. Is great to see.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
You're absolutely right, and I think we are living in an age where you just don't know. You don't know by the time 2021, once we're this time next year, we just don't know what games are going to be massive hits. You can't guess anymore what's going to happen because, something could come out of left field that we weren't even expecting. So I guess from there, at what point did you realise that video games could be a career? We'll start with you, Garry. We'll go back this way.
I can't think of a time where it wasn't going to be. So
nice.
My first job in the industry was as a games buyer in HMV. So I ran the whole game section over 20 years ago now, and I just always knew it was going to be there. So I went to uni afterwards to learn programming properly, quote unquote, to get into the games industry. Came out of that, and then joined here 14 and a half years ago.
That's amazing.
And that's it. So this is my first real job in the industry still.
Well, weirdly, this was my first job in the industry over a decade ago.
Well, there you go.
I started in these hallowed halls.
That's it.
But yeah, it's been some time. That is amazing. I love that. And just kind of slow. Have you kind of changed your track ever so slightly, or?
So I basically just accepted the first thing they'd offer me, which was a tools programmer. But then I kind of got seconded straight away to the gameplay team because I still play a lot of games to this day, and I was on the gameplay team a lot, and I did a lot of things for Burnout Paradise, Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, which is just getting a re-release soon actually, and Need for Speed Most Wanted. But then I started to transition more into the online space because it really interested me, the whole sort of what can be done there. I still think we're only sort of starting to tap into the potential of that, really. So I really sort of found a love with online and have stayed in there ever since now for the last 8-9 years. That's cool.
That is cool. It's nice to find, again, a kind of quite a fairly niche thing that's really, really big and important, but you need to have that interest in doing it to be able to really excel at it.
Definitely.
And Danny, what was your kind of first inkling that games might be?
I didn't. I was doing my A-levels, and I didn't think college was going to be for me, or university. And I went to careers advice, and I love computers, and the careers guy said, well, you should work in a bank if you love computers. They have computers in banks. I thought, that sounds like a good idea. So I went to work for a bank, which was one of the worst jobs. I sat there all day typing in credit card numbers from this really stupid system.
I bet you got to that point where you could do it without looking, though.
You could, but one thing people don't know is a number keypad on a PC is different way round to the old telephone pads. So I could do it like this, but when I went to dial someone's number back in the day, we used to do that. We couldn't do that, so that was the thing. And then I was made redundant from that job, and I went on the dole for a week, which was a humbling experience. And then my mother had a local newspaper, and she said, there's a job here about being a games tester. I thought, is that a thing? I guess so. She said, it's down the road. And I was lucky. It's just one of those things in life where there's this company called Mindscape that was in my hometown. So I went for a job interview on a Wednesday, got a job on Monday, and started as a tester, working on games such as Captive and Wing Commander. And
what game?
Mavis Beacon Teaches Typing was a game. So I did that for a couple of years. And then a friend of mine, today there's an assistant producer job at EA. Wanted to go for that, so I started at EA as a localization producer. Amazing. And never looked back from there.
And I love, even having a job advertised is one thing, but that was very much from the era where people would just look up the addresses of game studios and just go and knock on the door and hope for the best. Please, do you have a job? Is there anything I can do?
I did that in Cricklewood.
Amazing.
I did that in Cricklewood. There was one called Bits Games. They made the Die Hard game in about 2002 or 3. And it didn't answer, but it was like
the funny thing, I went to this job at Mindscape, and I remember to this day, in reception, and these two quite older people, I guess, because I still felt like quite young when I was in my 20s. They was talking about this game called Fire and Ice, and I was like, why are these adults talking about Fire and Ice, like this video game, right? And they were marketing people, and it kind of started to dawn on me that there's this industry right, that you could get into, and I was so passionate about it, I just loved it. I still love it today. I mean,
it is everything. I actually said this recently to someone who's video games is the melting pot of everything. Every art, every science can go into it, and you feel like we've only sort of scratched the potential of what they can do, whether it be storytelling in The Last of Us or something like that, or massively multiplayer with Fortnite or something. It's just phenomenal. I think there is a game for everyone, and if you haven't found it, you've just not found it yet.
You're absolutely right, and it's also video games are almost changing the layout of our culture, because you have football players, you have wrestlers, you have all kinds of these really massive individuals that have to do these hugely kind of in the public eye events. And in the past, where it used to be, they'll go out afterwards and get absolutely smashed, now they're all sitting down and playing video games. We're changing culture, because this is more exciting than being on the front page of the Sun tomorrow and getting in a load of trouble. I'm just staying home and play FIFA. It's fantastic. Yeah,
No, I
we're in a
agree.
good place, definitely. So I was going to ask about career challenges, but it's quite a big one to boil down into a question. But can you guys think of any examples throughout your career where you've been faced with a really big challenge that you've had to really work to overcome, and how that's kind of enabled you to push forward into the next phase of your career, I guess?
I think, not giving a generic answer, but the biggest challenge is actually getting a product out the door. As in, that whole cliche of the first 80% and then the next 80% is really true, because I launch a lot of games with the online space to make sure the back end works and people can play it. So we go from no one to like literally millions of people hitting our back end to make, making sure that works properly and sort of seamlessly for players is a massive deal. So every launch is a massive challenge, and then just trying to get it out stable and just make sure that the features are what you really wanted them to be, via technology or hitting technology limitations and stuff. But they are the challenges. But I mean, other smaller ones are, in previous titles. I remember one title where we spent a long time in the first year just making the wrong game, and then realising quite late on that we had to change.
It happens.
And then, you've used a lot of time, and there's that deadline coming along. It's always difficult.
And one of the greatest lessons I was ever taught in games, and I regurgitate it whenever someone asks for advice, but fail quickly, fail often. Like, get it done, move on. Find out what you can learn from that and get on to the next thing as quickly as possible. But it's so difficult when you're creating a world, when you're putting your feelings and your cares and all of your dreams into something, and then to have to go, oh no, this isn't working, scrap it. Impossibly difficult. But yeah, it happens. I mean, I can't imagine how many games there must be that get to a year into development, and then someone goes, wait, all of this.
You don't really hear about it, but there is a book coming out about it from, I think it's Read Only Memory, about the games that never were, which is basically, these are the titles that you never knew happened. And it's fascinating because, there's loads of stories like that in every studio about, products that never actually got out there. And there's a lot of sort of dreams that die with that. Do you know what I mean?
It's true. It's true.
We've got a lot better at it back in, I guess, the 90s. Games just get killed all the time. Right? You don't really hear about that. And it's not that the team didn't work hard. That's probably the worst thing. It's probably the hardest games I've worked on, and sometimes the worst games, right? Because you're working
that's it. You're trying to make it better.
You're trying to get there. But back in the day, we had a number of titles that got killed. And then EA kind of started to look at this and go, hey, this isn't the right way to do business. And then we started to get after our mega hits, right? The FIFAs and the Battlefields, etc., etc. But it's probably the worst thing is, and even then, even if a game comes out, a lot of the players don't know the number of features that are left on the cutting room floor.
Very true.
A lot of effort
Very
into
true.
things and just never see the light of day.
Triage at the end of a project is sometimes the saddest. Like, really, we've been on there all this time. Like, please.
It's almost there. Just give me one more week.
Yeah, just
and
a week.
That one more week never comes.
It's never a week either.
No.
It's that point of a project where time moves at like quadruple pace, and before you know it, it's gone. It's been eaten up.
Yeah.
God, I love game development. I really do. It's interesting stuff. Okay, so if we've talked about challenges, what about triumphs? What do you think your greatest career triumph would be, Danny?
Greatest career triumph. And that is a hard one, that, because as Garry said, it's so difficult. Even though we've kind of become a little bit numb to it because we got quite good at it of shipping games, it's every single time, every game is different. It's very difficult. Actually, for me, it was actually, the triumph was for a game I didn't ship. I was lucky enough to work out in Vancouver on FIFA for a number of years. And it was when Konami was eating our lunch a lot, and we were just holding on. I went over there to help and evolve it a little bit and did what I could. And the team, actually, after I went, delivered a FIFA that I remember for the first time outscored and outsold Konami on that piece. And it was, I think for the sports titles especially, it's because they come out every year, it's a foundation, right? You have to have a long-term plan, you have to look at these things. So, and I remember actually Andrew Wilson, who was head of FIFA then, sent me a note and said, hey, thank you for making the decisions you did back when you were in charge, because that allowed us to go forwards and get there.
That's
and that was testament to Andrew. That's sort of guy he is, but it was that was a proud moment because
very cool.
That was a good competition against Konami.
Definitely.
How about you?
I always find whatever launch I've just done is probably the biggest triumph. And I look at the last one that we did, which was the most connected Need for Speed we ever made, and it worked basically. And you go into that with trying to know as much as you possibly can about planning ahead, making sure that you've got extra hardware, making sure that all the services work as they should, but you don't know until the day you're live. And that worked great, but we put a lot of preparation into that for something which came during lockdown, which I think we were going to talk about anyway, which was the Crossplay patch. So we're the first team in EA to do that. And that was after like 4 years worth of planning and experimentation with it all. But I was particularly proud of that because it was done during lockdown. It was finished during lockdown, should I say. Taking some innovative steps to actually get it so we can test our games on retail hardware, which is not really a done thing.
No, that's quite an achievement.
And it was phenomenal. And we managed to stand that up within about 5-6 weeks. And the team I've got with the online team actually is relatively small. It's only about 6 of us. And that was particularly proud when we launched that. It was fantastic.
Oh, during lockdown as well. That is amazing. Yeah. Congrats. That
was really
quite
good.
An achievement, and does, very neatly lead us on to Need for Speed and Crossplay. So, I mean, it's a term that we all know what Crossplay is. We've all heard it. But why do you think, in your opinions, why is Crossplay so important to today's gamer? You can choose. You guys can choose who can start. I'm leaving it.
I just think there's just so much choice out there. So people don't like to be restricted to a platform anymore. And you can imagine sort of kids in a playground saying, I've got this platform, I've got that platform. They've both got the same game, they still can't play together. And it just feels archaic. Do you know what I mean? And
I agree.
It's bringing people together like as best as you can under sort of one gaming umbrella, like with that being Need for Speed in that example. And it's one of the last sort of barriers that our first parties are starting to drop, basically. And it's just another way and a better way to play with more people, which always is better for us in Need for Speed. Like the more friends, the better. If you look at the sort of previous systems we got.
Well, exactly. I mean, there are so many benefits. Like you said, breaking down those barriers, and whether or not people believe it or not, there is still this console war waging.
Yeah.
Raging. You
Both.
can wage war. You can rage. You can do both. That's fine. Jason's here to help me afterwards get rid of all these little mistakes. Waging something, Jace. What was it? You would be surprised. I've got a few followers left over from my Xbox days, and every now and then they'll share something on Twitter. I'll think, my God, it's still happening. Like, people are still getting this upset with each other about something that they haven't made, and they have no kind of horse in the race, specifically. Whereas on our side, we're like, no, break it down. Like, how can we make this for everyone and really make it, and that's a perfect example. Kids in a playground that, don't get to play together because they've both got equally powerful machines, the same game, but can't. It's really important.
We had a situation actually where, so I've been working with someone in online for about 10 years now, or 8-10 years, and he owns an Xbox and I own a PlayStation, and we'd never played together, like in production, and all the games that we do it internally and stuff, but in the real sort of live world, we've never done it. So it was almost like a little bit of a thing for ages. So we finally got to do it back in back in April, which was good.
Sweet.
Sorry, not April, June it was.
So how important is crossplay to, I mean, racing games as a genre? What more can you get out of a crossplay experience there?
Yeah, I think it's as Garry said with that example, it's just that competition that people want to have. I think the hot pursuit with Autolog shows it, right? It's just who's the fastest, right? That's all we want to know, is just who is the fastest.
Love that stuff.
And we had these artificial barriers put in the way, and getting onto what Garry was saying is, thankfully now, hopefully cross-play and cross-platforms going everywhere. Mum won't phone me up and go, which versions of this same game should I get? Because we've lived with it, right? Lived with it from Spectrum 64, Atari ST to Amiga, right? Sega versus Sony or Nintendo back in the day. So we see it quite naturally, but people outside of the gaming industry, they just don't understand that these games look almost exactly the same, but I have to get the right one or it's not going to work. And so breaking down those barriers, just letting people compete on their own terms, especially for racing, as I said, for that split second, that's what's going to open up, and we're really looking forward of some of the new features we're going to get and new ways of bringing our community together.
And I guess we've gotten to that point where consoles or console preference is probably something that's handed down now. It's almost like a football team, right? This is what you're going to play, and then your PlayStation forever, and you don't really understand why that happens. So again, it's so important for us to be you get to that point where we can break barriers down for people that, you never know. There may be kids out there that may not even know that Xbox is an option because I have a PlayStation. It's just the way I do things, So it is cool.
I'm hoping as we look at first party, it's going to be less about the hardware and more about the service, right? Which is the best service you can go after, right? And those sort of things, because everywhere else we go after, we get a choice of where we want to buy things from, where we want to do things for. So it's going to make us all raise our game, I hope.
That's it. We're in a lucky situation as well with driving where it is really even on all platforms. It's not like there's always that feeling with PC that shooters, you have more of an advantage on a PC. So we don't have that at all. So we've actually got quite an even sort of setup there, which is really nice too. So, but yeah, even from a player pool perspective, so if you're trying to matchmake on a game, so a game will launch, you'll have X amount of people on it, and then it will tail off after a while because people are just playing different things. Crossplay brings the whole pool together, so you've got more people to play with. So that will always be, these are the hardcore that have kind of stayed around. So it makes it more of a rich experience.
That makes sense. That makes perfect sense, and means that community is always bubbling away because it's all under one umbrella, which is a really productive thing for it to have. Very cool. Okay, so what friction might you come up against when developing crossplay for a game like Need for Speed?
Friction.
Nice, gentle, nothing incriminatory.
No, I think probably first party was the hardest thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys had the technology down, as you said. You've been working on it for a while, right?
Yes. So we did our first demo of this at the start of 2016 internally.
My goodness.
And every other game studio has probably got a similar story, but there are a lot of rules that first party have that say whether you're allowed or not to do that. So it was always like a first party and PC situation seemed to be fine, but then actually, basically, I'll just call it what it is. Microsoft and Sony have only started to play nice really over the last few years.
It's very recent, yeah.
Yeah, and but there are still a lot of rules in place that you have to adhere to. So whether it be direct connections to peers, you can't really do that. You still have to go through like relay servers and stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of friction there from that point of view, getting quite verbose design documents over to first parties to say, we promise we won't say the word Xbox on a PlayStation, things like that, and having to work around that from a UI point of view.
Gosh, I hadn't even thought about stuff like that.
Yeah, that's...
the doubling up, that must be so difficult to...
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of... I think with Sony and Microsoft, and that's what we call first party, once you understand the rules, we have a good team, certification team really help us understand that and say what we can and can't do. And then we did a pretty detailed, as Garry said, really detailed design documentation, ran that past them, and everyone said, yep, that's fine. But yeah, there were certain things you can't say, and certain we aren't allowed to. If there's a what we call platform-specific assets, so like in Need for Speed, a car wrap, we're not allowed to show that on the other platforms. So if you're on PlayStation and you see something that you can't actually get, we're not allowed to see that. So there's all these little edge cases and rules that we still have to be careful of. Hopefully over time that will become lessened. But then there's the bigger one, which we didn't deal with, was monetization cross-platform. That's still a big.
Oh, I can imagine that must be a spreadsheet nightmare on someone's machine.
So we didn't touch that, but that's in our future.
Wow.
I guess.
Yeah. No,
My
it's
goodness.
gonna be.
And what about getting crossplay into, Hot Pursuit, 10-year-old game? I mean, dare I ask what the challenges were with that?
I think, again, going back to it, so Hot Pursuit was more of a peer-based game, so they didn't use dedicated servers, which means they have to start using a relay server instead. In terms of bringing that into the modern era, there was a lot of parts of the back end that we had to completely rewrite to make that work within a crossplay world. So the reason why it worked quite well on Need for Speed Heat is we kind of planned it from the off, and one of the biggest takeaways I had to other people in some other talks that I've done for it was you need the ability to amalgamate and segregate on a whim. And we can do that quite easily with Need for Speed Heat right now. If we needed to turn off crossplay, we could do it, and it wouldn't impact the player's larger experience. They wouldn't lose anything, or there wouldn't be a feature that's missing, apart from crossplay, obviously. Whereas Hot Pursuit wasn't made that way, so the back end was completely redone for crossplay in mind, so that way players can experience that the way they could.
It's a lot of work.
Heat. Yeah, it was a lot of work,
Wow.
definitely. But it was worth it though, because it's going to be fantastic to see, especially seeing it on Switch.
Oh yeah, that will.
4,
I mean,
Xbox.
even I'm excited about that. Frankly, that would be. And I'm not. I mean, Mario Kart is about as far as I go normally, but yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. That's really cool. I mean, it's wonderful to be able to reimagine especially things that were so loved, and be able to put all of these, okay guys, this is where we are now, let's put all of these extra things on, and it's shinier, and it's faster, and it's all this kind of stuff. It's very exciting. Congrats, and I'm looking forward to that very much indeed. So let's talk about, it kind of, when you're dealing with crossplay, you kind of touched on, first party and how you need to deal with that kind of thing, but how difficult is it to, I didn't even think about adding lockdown to this question when I wrote it, but if you've got, 2 first parties, and you've got EA, and then you've got everyone at home, how difficult is it to kind of manage that conversation and make sure, as a producer as well, to get you to those key points?
Well, we didn't think about lockdown.
I don't remember that in the plan at all, but yeah.
Yeah, it was an interesting one with crossplay, because as a producer, as we look through all our features, as we look through the title, it wasn't high on our priority list. Obviously, you go, okay, we need basic multiplayer working, right? We need to get this in, this in. And kudos to Garry and his team. And a lot of it was their passion and them doing the work behind the scenes to go, hey, Danny, this is going to work. And I'm like, well, really, is it? They go, no,
It'll be an extra 3 days, but I'm still not sure.
They got this demo. I was like, well, maybe we should be working on this rather than this. But it was really the team's passion that convinced us. And also, I've talked to we're old school gamers, and this has been going on for a long time. Garry was so passionate about we need to bring our community together. This stuff is EA should be doing this, and no one else was doing it. We was looking around, no one else was doing this, and we work with our partners, EADP, a kind of central group that helps with our online games, and work with them to bring it together and do this. But we never really thought about lockdown, and so we kind of said, okay, we can't get it for launch. Let's do it as part of our live service. We started that, and then lockdown hit, and there was a lot of questions of whether we could actually do it on that sort of thing. As you can think, one of the big issues was we didn't have consoles at home.
You're not allowed test kits or dev kits at home.
Yeah, of course.
And from first party, although I think they're slowly starting to ease off on that, because unfortunately,
well, they'd have to. Yeah, we're not. It's
Yeah.
not changing. We're not going anywhere. You know, this is, we have to adapt.
We had a team in Romania who did a lot of our testing, and then a lot of our testing stopped. They were one of the first to shut down.
Oh,
so we're in this situation where we were very confident in getting the work done.
Yeah.
We just didn't have anyone to test it and those things. But then Garry and the team had come up with this idea, which we called the retail test environment, to allow us to get the game working on home consoles. And we worked with Sony and Microsoft to get approval on that. And that was probably a game changer for us. Really.
It's a massive, massive deal. It's the reason why it came out, and I actually think it's something that a lot of other teams are now doing in the future as a way, because everyone's got consoles at home.
It makes sense.
And the game's coming out on them anyway. And it was such a big deal because we ended up getting like an internal beta done out of it as well, because we usually do the exact same type of setup for internal testing near the end of the game, just to sort of say, okay, will this work in a production environment? So we managed to get that in such a way. So we were doing 2 builds a week, going out into a retail test environment all ready to go. So when we actually launched Crossplay, I'll be honest, I wasn't massively worried
you were
about
happy.
it. Because we've already seen it. And it's something that I think a lot of teams are going to be doing. Even when we come out of lockdown, whenever that happens, I think people are still going to want to do this type of testing in the future. And
well, it's valuable to be able to test on home kits and have everyone's varying internet speeds and varying locations. All of that
because usually we test. I mean, we try to set up a living room in the office, right, as best you can, but it's never
not the same.
But you go home, right, and on a big screen and sitting there and playing it.
Slippers on.
Slippers on in the pajamas. It was awesome.
I never forget downloading like a demo of the first Burnout game I made years ago at home, and I thought it was a completely different game. It just did not feel like what it did.
Interesting.
It really is just the sort of area that you play games at home isn't the same. So trying to recreate.
Well, that's it. You've completely catered it to this is how I like to play games.
Exactly.
Right? And in the office, it's this is how I office, but also playing video games. It's a different feeling entirely.
Yeah.
This is how I office. I think it's a George Bush quote. I don't know why it came out then, but I think it's a George Bush quote.
That's it.
Worrying.
Cool.
Okay, so what would you, if there were any game prior to you guys working with Crossplay, what do you think was kind of the industry standard for doing it really, and everything working perfectly, it was exciting and everyone kind of getting a buzz about it?
Actually, I'll tell you, I was frustrated to see when Call of Duty did it so well, because they took all the ideas I had for how we were going to do it. Because I had this planned out for years, like written down.
That's what he's saying.
Call of Duty came out and actually did like everything to do with the last Modern Warfare. It was fantastic. I think they've done a really top job on it. And yeah, even playing that recently with a friend who was on Xbox, another one on PC, and myself on PlayStation, it was all. When it just works, you don't even notice.
That's
that
it.
You're doing it.
Yeah, you're just playing games.
That's the goal.
There's no kind of mind-blowing aspect to it. It's just, oh, look, all my friends are here. This is rad. Let's play. You know, you just kind of go with it.
But it was good. In Fortnite, it was going great. And they kind of, I think, had a battering ram to Sony and Microsoft.
They really did.
They helped us tremendously on that stuff. But even the thing for me was, even back in the day, now this was a long time ago, I think it was Final Fantasy, was it 13 or 12? 13, wasn't it? The MMO. 11
had it with 360.
Yeah, 11, that was
PC.
it. So I had that back in, I was in Vancouver, so that would have been 2000s and something. And they had, I was playing on my 360 and I could play on PC as well.
Yeah.
And it was, you could see it was possible. It just...
that's really good, though, because they've got like cross-progression systems as well, which is areas that teams will explore in the future where, I mean, I was doing it as well recently, Final Fantasy 14 on PS4 and then just pick it up on my PC. And it was all just completely back and forth easily.
Seamless.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I think more games do that, the better.
I mean, it really does make sense. I love the idea of, not that this is genuinely the first time I've left the house for work since last year. But going into an office and playing at your PC, whatever it is, picking up and thinking, I've got 20 minutes and I need to clear my mind and whatever, and playing something. And then just being able to go home and pick it up on something entirely different console and be able to pick up in exactly the same place just seems like, why didn't we think of doing that sooner?
Yeah.
That makes a whole load of sense. But, technology...
We expect it with other entertainment like Netflix or YouTube, right? You just kind of go around and just pick up where you left off. And we're a little bit backwards at the moment, but we're catching up.
Well, we're getting there. We're the newest. We're the newest industry as far as all of these creative technologies, etc. It takes a little while for us to catch up with it all.
Still the most innovative as well.
I'd say so. I was going to ask about kind of any really... I don't want to say emotional. Emotional would be the wrong word, but really kind of memorable experiences that you've had because of crossplay. But because of our conversation, it's kind of become apparent that it's all about community. The games industry is all about community, and just making sure that everyone feels a part of the same thing.
I've got one actually straight away, which was the online team who made it happen, all together in a group.
Oh, that's lush.
And yeah, half of them are Xbox players. There was a PC player, myself as well, and their PlayStation, Arthur, who's PlayStation as well, all in a group together, chatting to each other on VoIP as well, which we couldn't do before.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was all just there working.
Nice.
Then we match made into a game, and yeah, anarchy ensued. So it's good.
Yeah, mine's slightly different. I guess I'm a little bit more on the business side of things. We presented to Laura Miele and her staff, who's a senior staff at EA. You were over there at the time, right? You was in San Francisco just for the lockdown. And we presented it, and we put a nice video together with this crew helped with and everything. And it was a really good moment, and they were like, "We have to do this. This is awesome. We've got to do this."
Surely there's nothing nicer than nervously going like, "Is it going to work?" and then getting that response. Doing it.
The entire of EA have looked at this as how we did this as the sort of template for it. I mean, I get questions. I'm not lying to you. Like once a day, I get a question about something to do with it.
That's fantastic.
And yeah, like it's a small team, but we kind of led the way on this, and we hope to do the same again actually for what we're doing next.
And being a small team means that you've got there's clearer lines of communication. It means that your processing and planning for the next time round is so much easier because there's it's 6 of us and I can go to this person and just kind of fill in all the details, and then you've got all of your checklist and everything for next time. And of course, games development is linear, always just goes absolutely fine. It will all be great.
Exactly.
But at least you have an idea of what you're likely to come up against, how much more time to allocate for certain things.
And we were first, right?
That
was the big push.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I say we were
awesome.
first.
he was like, oh, we've got to ship before this other time. We've got to get it out before this other time.
Yeah, the truth is that Squadrons was coming up behind us.
Very fast.
And I pulled out a few cables on their computers and stuff. Just
if it works, I mean, again, triage, that's what it's for.
But anyway, no, it was great actually, because even working with them, as soon as I booted up Squadrons, my EA friends were there already.
Lush,
so from other people who played it. So it's, fantastic job they did as well. It's a really good game.
It's very cool. Very cool. So with this newfound unity between Xbox and PlayStation and everyone feeling a bit more kind of part of a team as opposed to two sides, what do you think the future of gaming is? I mean, outside of crossplay, wherever it may go, I mean, what kind of things do you think we should be expecting?
I think I still say this, that I think next gen is actually moving towards it in a nice way where just get me in there so I can play for 5 minutes because I've only got 5 minutes and then move on. Think of like Netflix. You can watch something for 10 minutes, you'll pick up where you were and then you can put it back down again. You can pick it up later. So that sort of stuff, short, sharp shocks, little experiences and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, the longer experiences will be there. You still have your 80-hour Xenoblade Chronicles type.
Yeah.
But if you want to just have a quick 5-minute race, next gen will say, come play this now. You hit a button, you'll jump straight in, and it should be loading within a couple of seconds.
And that's it.
So,
the true joy of it would be to not even notice that that's what you're doing. Oh man, I forgot that I jumped in there for 20 minutes at lunchtime when I was having a really stressful day or whatever.
And I see a lot of games going more
cool.
online as well. It's just, we think of how many players are on our dedicated servers on Need for Speeds. In the future, the long-term future, I want to push that as much as we can. I know other teams in EA are doing similar things. I put it this way, Fortnite have led the way in that, and seeing 100 people on the server is a very exciting thing. We're not doing that on the next Need for Speed, though, I can tell you that now. But that's something that really interests me, I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. As I said, I think especially with things like crossplay and streaming, whatever you have underneath your television is going to become a bit of a moot point. It's going to be more about the service. I think there's going to be more, you'll sign up to subscriptions and you'll get everything for free, so to speak. You can pick and choose what you want. And then it's really going to be about the quality of the games and how you curate that experience. I think one of the problems with Netflix, as an example, I go on it and there's just too much to watch.
Yeah,
I end up watching nothing. So as an industry, we're going to have to find out how we can build these experiences out. And maybe in the future we won't be releasing a Need for Speed every few years. It will be just a continued live service that grows with our community. But it's whatever the future is, I'm glad to be part of it. I think it's going to be super, super exciting.
Absolutely.
I could not agree more. Final question, just because what we're here for and everything that we're doing with our filming at the moment. Try not be biased, but it's completely understandable if you are. Favourite Guildford game?
Favourite Guildford game? Wow. Apart from Burnout Paradise.
Apart from Burnout Paradise and every other EA. Well, you still can.
It's Burnout Paradise.
Okay, go for it.
Because I still think the best racing game I've ever made was Need for Speed Hot Pursuit. I still think the best driving game I ever made was Burnout Paradise. Because Burnout Paradise was do anything in a car, and it was just quite anarchic and crazy, and we still learn from that game every day. And the recent re-release on Switch was a big deal, seeing that on a handheld. It was fantastic. To me, I think there was a lot of people who still work in Guildford in different companies, whether it be Fireproof or other such companies, who all worked on that game as well. So there's a lot of love for it. So that's my answer.
It's a good choice.
My basic
Even
answer.
Jason's nodding behind the camera, good choice, good choice, brilliant.
Yeah, I'd go more controversial. I'm old, so I'd go old school. I'd say it used to be a company called Bullfrog back in the day. And we was lucky enough to publish the games back there, and I remember seeing Magic Carpet for the first time. You'd fly around and you had all these little balls that you had to pick up, and there wasn't much to the game to today's standard, but the technology they had of flying over this world and this collecting this mana, it was amazing.
Yeah,
and I miss that a little bit. I think we're still obviously very inventive in the industry, but I'd argue, and this is why I like indie now, I think I'd argue back then that I'd see things I've never seen before. When we went from 2D to 3D, right? When you saw the physics in the games for the first time. And I just remember seeing Magic Carpet, and I was like, holy hell, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And then, Syndicate and Dungeon Keeper.
The beginning of the future, as it were.
And it was, it was just an amazing time. And I'm hoping the kids today and the people younger today are getting into this industry and looking at this stuff and just as in awe as I was back then, because we're so lucky for what we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
These
and this is why I must be, I'm so unbelievably grateful to you guys, because it's difficult for us in the industry to be aware of how exciting our jobs are, because we deal with it every day, and we deal with the the minutiae, and we deal with the difficult parts and the the challenges. But in the outside world, this is witchcraft, and it's really interesting and it's really exciting, and we should talk about it as much as we can, safely, respecting NDAs, etc. But no, it's really so important to me that you guys came down to have a chat.
That's one of the problems with the situation we're in, is sometimes we work so hard on the games and we see all the faults in the games and all the stuff we didn't get to. But one of my favourite experiences is going to EA Play or somewhere like that, right, where you get to meet the crowd, the fans, the players, I signed autographs. They don't know who I am. So they go, can I have your autograph? And they're like, of course. But and you see people play this game, their eyes light up, and they just love it. And you go, well, this is why I get up every morning.
Absolutely, the escapism, the headspace, the opportunity, especially in the timeline we're living in at the moment, to really give people a chance to escape from what's happening outside their windows. So thank you from everyone. Thank you from all the gamers for playing and making and caring and, everything that is involved with making video games, which is a lot. Cool. Guys, thank you. Garry, Danny, thank you so much for coming to chat to us. We could not appreciate it more. Yeah, I'm sure we'll speak to you again.
Cool, nice one.
Stay safe.
See ya. Yeah.